Wholeness, welcome. This is Josh Dippold of integratingpresence.com. Today I have Rich Lewis joining the podcast. Rich, how's it going?
Great, great. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Well, thanks for reaching out. What I usually do, people probably get tired of me saying this, is if I haven't talked too much to the person, I will toss it back to them to intro themselves instead of me just reading off a sheet or a canned intro. So, who is Rich Lewis, and what kind of work do you do? Specifically, kind of work we have in common, I guess. Yeah.
Sure, sure. So, I guess what attracted me, or what attracted you to me in my practice is, I've been practicing silent meditation practice since early 2014 called centering prayer, which involves, as we discussed right before we jumped on, really inner work and inner, going within and connecting to your true self within. So I have a site since 2014 devoted to centering prayer called silenceteaches.com. And really it just shares what the practice is. And I share how this practice has healed and transformed me and kind of shown me the way forward in life and helped me live life better. And it's a practice that's really been so helpful to me that I simply want to share it with others in case it can help them. It's one practice, and maybe it will resonate with people and they'll take me up on it. And if it doesn't, there's a ton of contemplative type practices where you go within and get quiet and get out of the way. But so that's essentially what why we connected, was that it's a practice that may be helpful for your community as well, because I practice it from a Christian perspective, but anybody can practice it and they can come wherever they are at and try this type of practice, which is the nice thing I like to tell people is anybody can do this. It's not, if you're not a Christian, you can't do this.
Well, right on. And speaking of silence, it's so powerful. And you say it's a teacher as well. And we got a real life, unexpected taste of this right before the show here. Rich's microphone had just automatic or just somehow out of the blue went dead, and I couldn't hear him. So I said that's probably not the manifestation of silence you were expecting to practice today, but there it was, and we came back, and here we are, be able to talk too. But I feel that silence can also help our speech too, kind of even amplify it, and notice how powerful and impactful our speech can be when we've spent long moments in silence. You might have something to respond to that by, but I want to just, make clear kind of my intentions for bringing Rich on. I was raised Christian. I wouldn't consider myself like an active Christian now. However, I run in all kinds of different Christian circles. I've joined groups that have been primarily that. I have a friend she's a Presbyterian minister. And so what I do is I encounter folks who it seems like they would be turned off by more going within and more silent meditative like practices, because I guess they don't, this is a guess, obviously, they don't feel it's Christian enough. So, what I want to do is kind of bridge the gap here and just promote any kind of wholesome, skillful, and wise inner practices by going within. And not only will it not deter you from the Christian faith, from what I gather, it can actually help strengthen that and amplify that and become closer to this. So, first, I want to start at the beginning here. What is centering prayer and its background? How is it developed?
Sure. So centering prayer has been around since the early 1970s. It was actually created by three Trappist monks, so three Catholic priests in the early 70s. They saw other forms of meditation going on, and they wanted transcendental meditation, I think, being one of them. And they wanted something for the Christian community. One of the priests, Father William Meninger, was reading, I think it's a 14th century classic book called The Cloud of Unknowing. And as he read this book, kind of a method of silent, wordless meditation jumped kind of out of the pages at him. So he and the other two priests began kind of refining this practice, teaching it to other clergy, and then really just teaching it to lay people and sharing it in general. And then in 1984, Thomas Keating, who was one of the Trappist monks, created the Contemplative Outreach Organization, which now has a website, contemplativeoutreach.org. And it's really the main centering prayer site with tons of resources on this practice and tons of groups that practice, many of them either in a building or via Zoom, all throughout the US, but not just in the US, internationally. So the history is it's about a 50-year-old practice. But I guess the idea, and we can get into what is centering prayer and how you do it. The idea of silent prayer isn't just 50 years old. It really goes all the way back to Jesus. And there's various mentions of him talking about going off to be alone. And we don't surmise that he was always babbling, that he was silent, or he went off to the desert and he couldn't talk. He had to, if he fasted, he had to be quiet and just sat with God is what he did. So I guess many people don't realize Christianity has a rich tradition going all the way back to Jesus and even further back. You can, in the Old Testament, be still and know I am God, and various mentionings of silence. So people just don't realize it goes back to Jesus and then continues to come into the present future with the desert mothers and fathers in the 3rd and 4th centuries, and various mystics mentioned throughout history as you approach the year we're at now. So it's just not talked about a whole lot at some churches, and not possibly accepted. But they don't realize there is a rich tradition. And I think it's really the Western church versus the Eastern church. So the Western church, perhaps in the US, there are some churches that are willing to do silent practices. Some Catholic churches, some Presbyterian churches, some United Church of Christ, and some Episcopal churches I've noticed tend to be open to the idea of, come on in, Rich, and just come join our Zoom session and share it with us. But I think it's really more the Eastern Orthodox churches have been practicing it for thousands of years. The Western churches, some perhaps because they have a pastor that's been exposed to it and says, this is some good stuff and I need to incorporate it into my congregation. So it's been around thousands of years, but people just don't realize it.
In the Eastern Orthodox thing, I don't. It's amazing how much I've been exposed. Regular pretty much anybody in the States, since there's still a huge churches everywhere. Just put it that way. That's one very overly simplified way to look at it. But the Eastern Orthodox, at least here in the Midwest, is not very prevalent. And so it wasn't until maybe 5-10 years ago I even really heard about Eastern Orthodox. I don't know what the deal is, if it's been suppressed or the politics. Probably there's politics involved in everything, but we don't have to go into that now, because that's a whole another lifetime of study, perhaps. Just about pretty much many areas within Christianity itself, you could spend the rest of your life studying, going deep on each one. What I did want to see if maybe go just a tad bit deeper is my kind of eyes opened up a little bit and my ears perked up a little bit about this cloud of unknowingness. Is there anything else you can say to expand upon that? Because that seems like more of the modern day origins of this, perhaps, or had a significant influence in it, right?
It's just, I guess the centering prayer practice was kind of found in that book. By this 14th century book. So why don't I just get into the how you do the practice, because the idea of it was formulated as he read this book. The idea of centering prayer was formulated as the gentleman read this book, and then further refined by the other two Trappist monks.
Sure. Well, let's get into it then. Yeah,
Sure.
we can how it's practiced, and then if you feel it's appropriate to pick anything else up about that book, then please do so. But yeah, let's talk about, we gave a little bit of history now. Let's how does one practice this? And then what is as we'll probably get an idea of what exactly it is as we learn about the practice, because it's a practice, not really a study or a teaching. It's something we're actually doing and being. Right. So yeah, please.
No, that's correct. So it's considered two things: meditation, and I get asked this question a lot: is this just meditation? And the answer is yes. And so yes, it is meditation, sitting silently, wordlessly. but we consider it a relationship with God. So during centering prayer, we're opening to the presence and actions of God within us. So we do not believe we're God, and I do not believe I'm God, but I believe I'm sitting with God and opening to this presence that's not only, around me, but is within me. So during centering prayer, we open to the presence and actions of God within in silent in a silent practice. And how you do the practice is you sit comfortably with your eyes closed, and then to begin your silent sit, you introduce a sacred, what we call a sacred word. Usually you have one or two or three syllables at the most. So it could be God, it could be beach, ocean, a color. And this signifies you're now sitting with God, and you're kind of designating this time as you're sitting with God silently. And then as you're sitting there, as you begin engaging your thoughts, and what I mean by that is when you begin thinking about all the things you did before your sit, or you begin thinking about the errands or things you have to do after your sit, you realize you're no longer sitting with God, you're sitting with yourself, and you're planning and plotting or reminiscing. So you reintroduce the word interiorly to bring yourself back to the present moment and let go of your engaged thoughts, and then let go of the word as well. So you use it when needed. Use the word when needed, not as a mantra. And there are mantra practices where you're saying a word over and over again. In centering prayer, you just use it when needed to come back to the present moment. And the purpose of your sit, of just to sit with God and get you and your thoughts out of the way. And go ahead.
Oh, yeah, and it is lovely too because in traditional meditation practice, a lot we'll just use our breath as an anchor, right? This idea of a word it really fascinates me. One thing that's always fascinated me, well, I don't know about always, but is language itself, right? And in the Bible, the word, in the beginning was the word, and the word was God. I think it's one translation or somewhere along that. And so just this mystery of language itself, where it comes from, how it comes to us, how the words are chosen that we speak, and how it just happens so effortlessly. And a double-edged sword where the mind can use language to go off into distractions, and how the other end it can help center and ground in our being and give connection. So it's a really powerful phenomenon, language, of course. So yes, it's a really interesting and cool way to have a meditation anchor. Yes.
And you don't have to use a word. I actually use an image. I was going to mention
Okay.
some people, if you're more of an auditory person, you might
Yes.
use a word. And I started with the word, but then I realized I'm more of a visual person. So I
Yes.
picture an image in my head. I actually just picture, since I've been practicing for the last 6 or 7 years, I picture an image of a Jesus icon that I came across, and I don't draw it out in detail, but I just think of that to bring myself back to the present moment. So you can use an image if you're more of a visual person. You can use your breath if you're more of a physical person. And some people don't want to close their eyes. They're afraid they'll fall asleep. So they keep their eyes open and just kind of stare at a spot 5 or 6 feet in the distance. So you can use what I'll call it a sacred method, any one of those. And someone may have another version that they use to come back. So any method just to keep coming back to the present moment can be used.
Very good distinction. And of course, I'm more of an auditory thinker until I will get more silent and then make a conscious choice. But I really like your object, and it's there's an Eastern Orthodox practice too called iconography, and I think that's in the Catholic
Oh,
tradition too.
right,
You're
right.
probably right, and so that's a really profound practice in itself. But this is a good point because a lot of people, I would say the majority of people do think in images, and there's quite a few that do in words as well. And of course, they both associate with each other usually too, right? So I mean, they can go hand in hand. It's just like when we become aware of our thoughts and thinking, usually a person is more predominantly visual based or auditory based, right? Or like you said, I guess is it kinesthetics or
Yes.
somatically based. Yes. So
Right,
yeah,
right.
that's a really good distinction. Instead of trying to fight something that's not really natural, especially when starting off, that's a really great point to know too. Good distinction. All
And the
right.
only thing,
Mhm.
well, and the only thing I'll make too, a comment I'll make
Sure.
is, so once you pick your method, you don't want to be flip-flopping in the middle of your
Yes. Very
practice. So
good
you want to,
point. Yes.
otherwise you'll spend more time thinking about what's the next method I'm using when I have a thought. So,
Yes.
you know, pick an image or pick a word or pick your breath and use that the entire time. And then at the end of your practice, if you realize, you know what, it's not working for me, then try something the next time. But use the same method, the same word or the same image, obviously the same breath.
Yes.
Otherwise, you'll confuse your practice more than help it. That's all. One comment
It
I want to make.
is. This is another huge point in meditation too. Is that when we first start getting into, at least when I did, it just all this new possibility starts coming up because the mind, a lot of stuff gets cleared away, a lot of noise and clutter, and so the mind power and heart power starts amplifying, and we just realize all these vast possibilities, and it's so tempting to change the object and just explore all these different modes and aspects, but again, that's just kind of like another distraction, especially when we're doing more concentration type practices. I think in the Buddhist tradition, it's called samatha. There's samatha and vipassana. The samatha is actually staying with one object over and over again, like Rich is talking about, while the vipassana is more, I guess, it's probably a distortion saying this, but it's more investigating the nature of reality. But that can become really destabilizing if there's not a really stable base. And so the type of practice Rich is talking about, come back over and over again to the object. And at least I know from my practice, when I'm doing that, the mind can get very calm, very peaceful, very the amount of joy and pleasure that just arises naturally from staying with one object over and over, especially when it's not an emotionally charged object, more of a neutral object, or one that we really resonate with. The mind becomes very powerful, very peaceful, very calm, collected, and centered. Yes, and so that's another very and it can be, like I said, it can be so tempting to go to go off to something else, and maybe you can scratch that itch some other time, but we want to dedicate that certain amount of time we have to our practice, whatever it is, building and strengthening that practice, because it will not gather momentum, or won't gather as much benefit and momentum if we don't stick with it. But with the caveat of Rich saying that if you choose something, you can't stay with it, well, then that's not going to be beneficial either. All right, so I guess maybe following on the progression of this is, what are some of your experiences in your own personal practice with this? And then what are some that others come to you, what they've experienced too? Now, this can be all the way from the mundane to the most woo-woo psychic experiences, or woo-woo, experiences with God, or however you want to take it. I mean, I'm really open-minded, and the audience is too, and at the same time, very practical wisdom aspect of it, well, as how we can integrate this into our daily lives, and how this, in practical day-to-day terms, helps our lives too.
Sure. I know I do have some coaching clients. I have a recent coaching client. I guess his practice that he's been doing for a number of years has helped him become, one fruit of it that's been very helpful for him is he's become more playful, because he's always felt that he has to be on. He always felt that he was very critical of himself, and he's not allowed to play, and he's not allowed to have fun, and he should always be working. He should always be productive. And he specifically has shared with me that this practice has allowed him to become more, and we've been working on a lot, but he's realizing it helped him become more playful and just enjoy the moment, and maybe do things that he's never done before, and maybe dance or sing, or just enjoy the moment, or do a puzzle, or play a game with his wife. So it's helped him. That's one specific area that he wanted help with, but he realized the practice has helped him become playful, probably because he's really just accepting the moment for what it is, and he doesn't have to be so critical and feel that he has to be so productive that he's focusing too hard. And he needs to, the practice is letting go, because you're letting go during center prayer, and you learn to let go in everyday life, and then you're better able to hone in on the moment and what it requires of you, which includes playfulness. So that was kind of a neat thing that I have a recent coaching client tell me, and I'll let you react to that. Then I can share how it's
Sure,
helped,
and that's a
how
great
it's helped me.
that's a great reminder for me too. I'm sorry to cut you off there, because
It's okay.
it's like my to-do list, right? Bam, 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 productivity, and that's something I'm really good at. But it's an important point, because it does open up that wisdom aspect, and when we have that degree of wisdom, we can see, well, how fun is that? You're missing out on so much the richness of life, right? And the beauty and the diversity and the connection. Yeah, that's really important. And it's ironic that leisure time turns into work. I hear these people that are hugely rich. Their job now is to for leisure time, where you have people that are still struggling. Well, their leisure time is often spent trying to do more work, right? So it's interesting how that works. Yeah.
So, and then in terms of me, as I think about myself and kind of reflect back now that I've been practicing it since June of 2014 on a pretty fairly a daily basis, twice a day, for me, I've definitely noticed a number of fruits from the practice. Much more confidence in myself. I'm a much more confident person, whether it's at home as a father or whether it's the work I do here. But I also have a regular day job, and I work in the 401k space and deal with large corporate accounts. I'm a much more confident person when I'm on phone calls or making presentations. So I've definitely noticed I'm more confident. I think I'm more calm. I'm less reactive. And what I mean by that is I'm more willing to listen to people and not instantly react to that's wrong. I'm more willing to listen and then realize that's kind of a neat way of looking at things, and maybe I should try it, or maybe I don't agree with it, but that's okay. And just it's going to be okay. So I'm less reactive, I'm calmer, I'm more confident. And I would say, not that I was not excited to live life, but I have an excitement for life, and I kind of look forward to what's today going to bring and what's going to happen. And even if it's a challenge, I'm going to get through it if I keep persisting and come out the other side. So I guess it's taught me persistence and resilience, where I will be okay, and I can let go of. I see a task I have to do at work, and I think, oh my God, why did this have to happen to me? And then I can calm myself down and say, you know what, this is okay, I can handle it. And the next thing you know, it's done, and I'm like, why did I make such a big deal about it? So centering prayer helps me let go of fear, anxiety, worry, and just get the thing done. So those are some really neat fruits that and I have others, but those definitely come to mind. When I look back, I was not as confident. I was not as excited. I was more reactive, and I was more afraid of the unknown and new things that are out of my comfort zone.
And well, yeah, plenty to pick up on here too. Yeah, the comfort zone, getting out of that is how we grow, right? And at the same time, if there's too much growth, we need to pull back into our comfort zone a little bit to integrate the experiences that we've had. And yeah, those things that happen to us that it's like, why is this a lot of times I've found that there's a lesson there, right? There's lessons to be learned there too. So many, like, what is this trying to teach me? But the self-confidence, I'm glad you brought that up, because I had this huge distortion early on where I was confusing self-confidence for egotism, right? So all these, for whatever reason, the examples I was given in my life of a high self confidence were usually, at least my perception, they were also attached to someone who was very egotistical, and didn't really care about anybody but themselves. And it's obvious now that they're not the same thing, right? There can be a really healthy, almost necessary, yes, version of self confidence. It doesn't have anything to do with egotism, right? So yeah, and unfortunately, it took me quite a while to make that distinction, and then kind of maybe attract better examples of healthy, especially masculine self confidence into to my life. So I had better reference points for that, and it's been a huge difference too, being able to discern that and then help exemplify that myself too. Yep.
No, I mean it's not really coming from ego. It's more coming from, I'm confident I can handle this task, or I'm confident I can help this person. It's not, I am great and look at me. It's a different type of confidence. A confidence that if you give me this task, I'll get it done. Or if you need my help, I can help you. Or if there's a new thing I need to try and explore, I'm confident I can do it and figure it out. So it's different than, ooh, look at me, look how great I am.
Yes, and that's exactly the distinction that I had to get out of, because not only was I mixing the two together, but I was doing the same thing myself. So yeah, way behind on that, but that's okay. So now I have that that opposite end of the polarity to make the other end stronger too. So when there's one negative side, then there's always the opposite positive side of it too, and then trying to perhaps bring those in balance in certain areas. Yeah. So, okay, so now this is a consistency. Let's talk about this because I've had a daily practice since 2012, twice a day as well, pretty much. And I can't really think of anything that's helped me so much as a daily practice. Something that is like a constant that we can rely on, that we can do no matter what. It can always fall back on. I got the advice that you get a hobby because you can always fall back on your hobbies. But that's just it's a good idea. But instead of looking at it like a hobby why not take your hobby to a daily practice? So it builds so much. And I tell people if they're not even interested in any of this type of stuff, find a daily practice, even if it's just singing in the shower for a couple seconds, or something you can do every day as kind of like an anchor and a stability and something to draw on. But I want to hear about your kind of the experiences, maybe, or the contrast or the benefits you've noticed since you've started a daily practice, I guess, as a reference point before.
Sure. So I do it at least twice a day. So for me, it's the first thing I do to begin my day is my centering prayer 20-minute sit, and I've actually kind of built a routine around it. So I actually before it, I have. I'm a big believer in affirmations. These are single sentence statements of things I want to do with my family or my personal life or my mental health or my physical health or financial or social or community. These are things that are important to me. So I read them and I kind of let them go into the silence. And then I begin my silent sit. And then usually after my silent sit, I'm doing two things. I read from a current book that I'm reading, and it could be anything. It could be fiction or nonfiction. Whatever I'm reading, I'll read for 5 or 10 minutes. And one other thing I do as part of my practice is journaling. I've started doing that over the last 2 months. I've been wanting to do it for years, and I keep hearing how powerful it is, and I keep telling myself I'll do it. Well, I finally did it, and you don't have to make it complicated. I just take however long. It's a dump, and I'm simply whatever I feel like saying, I say. So it could be, I don't like the work that needs to get done later today. If that's how I'm feeling, I write it. Or if I need to motivate myself, I'll say, I'm powerful, I'm resilient, I'm going to get this done. So I've incorporated that into my routine every day as well in the morning. It's just a quick journaling, even if it's 5 minutes, and single words or single phrases or even sentences. So that's really, and I found it so powerful because then I can look back and read them, and it's helped me. Like if I have a day that I'm drudging, I'll put on there, and I did it this morning. I have a bunch of things that needed to get done during my day job, and I listed them down, saying this is going to get done, this is going to get done, this is going to get done. I'm going to have a great day, and I'm going to end the day and be pleased because everything will be done. So that's kind of my morning routine is affirmations, let them go into the silence, do my silent sit, read a little bit from a book I'm reading, and then do some journaling, and then begin my day.
Very cool. This is a big part of my practice too. I guess the affirmations that they are really powerful. My little spin on it is putting them into intentions. Intentions. So I intend to, or I set the intention to. And for me, I found that while it can build willpower it can build up willpower if I say, I am going to do this. For me now, I've gotten to the point where I just sometimes I still do that because I have a fairly strong will. However, I take it seriously, so I don't commit to a lot of things because the more I commit to things, the more commitments I have, the less or the more I'm spread thin, so for me, I found that prioritizing those affirmations, what is the most important thing, and I know you're probably pretty good at this of what's and I forget how you said, but what I like to do is allow. So working with this thing of allowing as well, instead of saying I intend to, I more like I allow such and such, And so that's one thing for my intention. Now the other thing you said, whoops, funny here, I've backed away from my screen. Okay, so the other thing that brought up is the reading afterwards, and that's a really good idea because once the mind is calm and settled, and we focus so deeply, that's a great time to do cognitive things too, right? Because it seems I'm guessing your absorption and your understanding and your insight into what you're reading is expanded at that time, right? Yeah, coming out of the meditation is a very important point. It's a very powerful thing, and sometimes the insights can come after the meditation too, during the day. So notice that's a key time as well. And the journaling, I just have to say, yeah, I got advice a few years ago that if you're not journaling, you're faking it. And I'm like, what? I'm not faking it. I'm going to do this. So I've kept a daily journal, probably for years now. And sometimes it's only like a sentence or two. And for me, it's not as much emotional and things like that. It's me keeping track of my day. What did I do that day? But the retrospective part of it is so important because the hindsight is where we really can change and grow and evolve. I don't do that enough. I need to go back through it now that I've got years and just, flip to a random day. Oh yeah, I remember that day. What was going on? Oh, how I could only see part of it then, but now it fits into the bigger picture, and how that informs what I'm doing now are events that might have happened and played out. So it's a beautiful practice, yeah. And you've already noticed the benefits in your short amount of time doing it. So yeah, that's another huge recommendation. Now, what about retreats of centering prayer? Have you led those, like extended periods of time, either in real life or on Zoom? And if there's anything else you want to pick up about what I said too.
I do actually with another gentleman that wrote a book. So I wrote Sitting with God, A Journey to Your True Self Through Centering Prayer, which came out in August of 2020. I connected with a gentleman named Brian Russell, who also published a book less than a year ago on centering prayer. He has a podcast. I was on his show, and then we just resonated with each other. So, and said, we need to do stuff together. So we're actually tomorrow, we're doing, I think it's our fourth one. We do a monthly centering prayer gathering. It's 90 minutes. And the first 20 minutes, 25 minutes is really just us talking and on an interesting topic that we put together. Sometimes it might be me asking him questions or him asking me questions, but there's usually a topic. And then we lead them into a 20-minute centering prayer sit. So I know it sounds funny, but we do. We lead them into the sit, and then everybody sits silently for 20 minutes. And most of the people turn their cameras off and mute. And then at the end of the 20-minute period, we have 30 minutes left, or we allow at least 30 more minutes of just Q&A, where they can either ask questions. They can ask questions upon what we talked about at the beginning, or they can simply share whatever they want to share. So we've been doing this, and many of the people have already been practicing centering prayer, but in some cases they might be new. So we always, right before we do the sit, I teach them, how you do the practice in case there's anybody new. So now that you said that, this is, I think, our fourth one. We're doing it once a month and inviting anybody who wants to join us to come in via Zoom. And it's been a neat experience. I mean, we've had people from all over the US, and we had a gentleman call in from Croatia, and we had a couple people from the UK. So that's one thing that I've been doing. And then I'll get invited to come into churches, and we'll do it via Zoom, and I'll kind of cater to what they want. So in some cases they want to do centering prayer exactly like what I just explained. In other cases they just want to have me give them a talk, share the practice, and then let them experience 5 minutes of silence. So I do that as well. So a little bit of both. So the monthly gathering, which is a 20-minute sit, or churches inviting me to come in, whether they have an hour or 90 minutes, and asking me to teach them centering prayer and let them experience the sit, or they'll give me a topic and I'll incorporate that into my talk plus the centering prayer.
Very cool. And actually, this isn't, at least in the Buddhist communities that I do, I'm actually doing a day-long meditation retreat tomorrow on Zoom.
Okay.
It's out of Redwood City, California. At least one of the teachers is. So that's the whole day, just the meditation, right? But a lot of the other meetups and gatherings on Zoom now, it's very similar to the format. There'll be a talk. they'll be sitting, and then they'll open it up for questions and
Right.
answers. I mean, it's a really common format now, and like you're saying, the hybrid where part of it can happen in real life, and then other people can join on Zoom. It's becoming really more and more common as far as I can notice now with different things that I check out and join. So, yeah. Well, why don't you we're getting closer to the end here. Why don't you leave folks with any other thing you'd like to, anything else you'd like to say? And then also, we've mentioned kind of the events you do. Tell people more about your book, anything you want to say about that, maybe the writing process, the inspiration process, anything you want to say about that. Of course, where people can get it too. And then you can leave folks with your social media links, website, any other events you have coming up, any messages you want to say, and I know this gathering is really important, this belonging. All of us as humans, we're just better off if we feel like we belong to each other, to something, to someone. This in the gathering is a really important part of life too. So, plenty of stuff there to pick up on.
Sure, sure. Well, the first thing I would just encourage people is to try a silent practice. So, whether it's centering prayer or whether it's some type of silent meditation, I would encourage people to find a practice and try it for 30 days. And to make it a habit, I'll suggest they do it first thing in the morning. So before you begin your day, do your silent practice. If the idea of sitting for 20 minutes seems daunting, you don't have to start with 20 minutes. Sit with 5 minutes and try to make an effort to do it every day for 30 days and just see what happens and see whether that resonates with you, and you can decide, you know what, this isn't so bad. I think I'm going to keep at it, and I think I'm going to slowly start increasing the time. So I would just challenge people to commit to 30 days of 5 minutes first thing in the morning and see what happens, is what I would challenge people to do.
Yes, I can't echo that enough.
And then in terms of centering prayer, I have a free ebook on my site. So if they come over to silenceteaches.com and subscribe, I have a free ebook that's very easy to read and get through in five or 10 minutes, which kind of shares how, it answers all kinds of questions on centering prayer. The top of the page is a question, and then the bottom is just bullet points of answering the question. So it'll share the practice and how to do it. So I would encourage them to take a peek at my site, silenceteaches.com, try the free ebook, and just see if this is a practice that resonates with you. And then if you find it does, they're certainly welcome to take a look at my book. They can see it on my website, Sitting with God, A Journey to Your True Self Through Centering Prayers. It's available on Amazon and most online retailers, Barnes & Noble, Target, Walmart, and it's available internationally. I've noticed it in different spots. So they can, if they want to further explore the idea of centering prayer, they can check out my book, because it's just a regular person who works a regular day job, and sharing what the practice is for people new as well as people that want to go deeper. But it shares how it's healed and transformed me as well. So I think that's what a lot of people have said. They like the book because it was easy to read. It shared my journey. I was open and vulnerable in the book. The chapters are short. I'm purposely short, and even within each chapter, that you have a heading, so you know what to read under that section. The sections are short. At the end of each chapter, questions for reflection and answer if you want to kind of reflect on what you just read. So people told me they liked it because it was an easy book to read. They could read it in chunks, and it was just coming from a regular person who's sharing how much this practice has helped and healed him. So silenceteaches.com really is the best place to learn about me, my book, or even just take a peek at the free ebook and see if this is something that will resonate with you.
Well, very cool, Rich. And those will be linked in the show notes. And thanks for everybody for joining and listening in. May you all be blessed with an ideal and optimal day and night. Bye bye.